Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my third time visiting the Twin Cities Creation Science Association, so thank you. I must have done something right the first time, otherwise you wouldn't have me back. So I hope you enjoy it tonight. It's a little different topic, but let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you that you are a mighty God. Thank you for what you are doing in the Philippines through that book and with Bruce Malone, who travels there. Thank you for that, and I pray that you would use it in a mighty way and bring revival there. We also pray for our country, for revival in our country, because we do need people to understand your word, and the truth of your word, and to explain it, and to explain the gospel, the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ. I ask that you bless my words, and may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my Redeemer. We pray in Jesus' name. All right, aliens, UFOs, and the Bible. Wow, that's a little different topic for this group, isn't it? Usually we're talking about, science, fossils and rocks and DNA and genetics and biology, microbiology, and showing how science and the Bible are compatible. So where'd this thing of UFOs come from? Well, a lot of people believe in them. A lot of people think there are aliens. So I was asked to put this talk together by someone that some of you know, Jim Orm, who moved from Chicago to northern Wisconsin and began the Northwoods Creation Association. He said he wanted to talk on this, and I was scheduled to go up there, and this is pretty much what you're going to see what I came up with, and then I've added to it a little bit since then. It is an interesting topic, but what's the connection to creation evolution? Well, it's in our culture, first of all. We have a many-fold increase in UFO sightings. We've all heard about them over the years, but they keep increasing. They're still going on, and I'll give you a couple examples. And surveys indicate that more than 80% of Western people believe that ET is out there. Okay, extraterrestrials are out there. 80%, that's a lot. That's a lot, and I believe there's a lot of Christians, especially young Christians, who say, well, everybody sees them. They must be real UFOs out there. And of course, we also have an increase of stories about abductions, not just seeing a few lights in the sky, but being abducted by aliens. And it's not just beam me up, Scotty, it's something else going on. We'll get a little bit into that. But anyway, it is going on in our society. And we also have a growing belief that life on Earth was seeded by aliens. And that's big in our culture today. How many of you saw the Ben Stein movie Expelled? And at the end of the movie, Ben Stein is interviewing Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist. And he even acknowledges that we have no clue how life could have formed on Earth. We'll get into that. But then he says, well, it could have been designed by aliens. And so it's a lot of people talking about it. Of course, that just pushes the problem further back. So I think it is worthwhile taking a look at it. 20 million people claim to have seen a UFO. Over 4 million Americans claim to have been abducted. That's a lot of people, folks. A lot of them. And worldwide, 3% of the population thinks they were abducted, held captive or something by an alien. So it is worth taking a look for it. Hundreds of sightings almost every day, and something worldwide is happening, and it's been going on for decades now. So it is worthwhile taking a look at this and trying to put a scientific spin on it, as well as what else may we learn from Scripture. And I'll get to that at the end. But here's just another example of a recent sighting. This was just November 2018, just a few months ago. If you saw it on the news, UFO sightings by pilots are being investigated by Ireland's Aviation Authority. Wow. What happened is 2 different planes with different sets of pilots called in and said, hey, we're on our way to London, we're flying from New York to London or something like that. And they call in to the Irish control tower as they get close to Ireland and say, hey, are there any military exercises going on around here that we should know about? No, what's this? Why do you ask? Well, I just saw these lights. They're just zooming by the plane, and they're making these right turns, and then they're accelerating super fast away, and they're gone. So we're just wondering what they were. British Airways pilot contacted Shannon Air Traffic Control, and then another pilot from Virgin Airlines also reported multiple objects following the same trajectory as previously reported. So in Ireland, they are having to check into this, because you got pilots, which are usually, pretty good sources of information. They're on their toes, they understand technical things, and they're saying, what is this? And then, recently, if you got to be careful what you see on the internet, but this really went around the world after Christmas, just a few months ago. There's these mysterious, they even call it the TR-3B UFO sightings, and they get that designation because they think that's a secret US military aircraft program. The TR-3B, military says nothing about it. But then some people actually got pictures of it, and they were convinced that either we have captured alien technology and reverse engineering it, and they're believing this, or these are actual UFOs. And this is one of the pictures, and they seem to have a series of lights in a triangular pattern. And this has been reported in several places, including Russia and Kansas, a couple of different places, and North Carolina. So there it is. Now in the back, I have a book called Alien Intrusion, and a lot of my material, not all, but a lot of it came from Gary Bates from Creation Ministries International. He wrote a book called Alien Intrusion, and there's a DVD back there too. He made a movie. How many of you saw the movie? It was in theaters, about 3 of you. Okay, well, now you get my version. But this book came out in 2005, and it was an Amazon top seller in the top 50 of Amazon books. And it's the only creationist book ever to have reached that level of sales on Amazon. And then it was updated in 2011. Here's a picture of Gary Bates, and he's meeting with the head of the annual Roswell Convention in this picture. And there's Gary Bates petting one of the heads of the aliens also visiting. Okay, so there is big interest in this topic. What's going on? How many of you heard of the Roswell Convention? Oh yeah, about a third of the room at least raised their hand. So let's look at it more. How about a late Professor Stephen Hawking? You've all heard of him. Some people have very high regard. Of course, he did a lot of amazing mathematics. He's an astrophysicist, had a lot of theories and thoughts. But he believed in UFOs, and he actually warned against them before his death. He said, by chance, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. The aliens might simply raid Earth for resources and then move on. And isn't that the plot of a lot of UFO movies, science fiction movies, right? How many of you saw Independence Day? The original and then the one. Now, I have to confess, I like science fiction movies. I grew up in high school and college reading lots of science fiction, but the classics by all those authors like, now of course the name's dropped. All those classics like Isaac Asimov, yes, thank you. And Robert Heinlein, there we go. I read a lot of those, and I just enjoyed it. I like movies. When Star Trek came out, man, I was right there. Cool stuff. But anyway, that's what the theme is. Aliens might raid Earth, take all our stuff, don't care if they kill us all, and then move on to some other solar system. Then Hawking said, aliens almost certainly exist. Certainly exist. But humans should avoid making contact. One day we might receive a signal from a planet like Gliese 832c, but we should be wary about beaming back a response by any advanced life forms in real life, to any advanced. So what is he saying? Yeah, we don't want to let them know we're here. Because, we're not ready to fight them maybe, like in one of those movies. Anyway, but then others have said this, you know what? It's probably too late. They know we're here. According to some senior astronomers, it's too late to consider whether we should send such transmissions because we've been doing it for decades. We've been transmitting signals that go out into space of all the early radio programs and TV shows. So somewhere in Alpha Centauri, there are aliens on some planet watching the first run versions of Gilligan's Island and I Love Lucy and Andy Griffith. And the young people have no idea what I'm talking about. Those are old TV shows that took 40 years to get to Alpha Centauri. So they know we're here. So I guess that's too late. That cat's out of the bag. Can you imagine the aliens watching that I Love Lucy episode with the candy machines? How many have seen that? I just think maybe that's how we eat. I don't know. Ufology. That is actually a word. The study of UFOs. And the modern UFO phenomenon began about 1947. I mean, there's been people reporting seeing things all along in history, but it really took off in our present age after World War II. Businessman Kenneth Arnold was flying his light plane over Mount Rainier, and he says he saw 9 saucer-shaped discs as if skipping across the water. And these discs were just, there was 9 of them, and they're going zing, 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 and then gone. And then gone. So, in fact, this is where the phrase flying saucer entered our lexicon, because he described them as saucer-shaped discs, and they were flying, skipping along. 1947 was also the year of the Roswell incident. I'll tell you more about that. But then, ever since, we've had hundreds of sightings, and in 1947 we also had 850 sightings, kicked off by this one earlier in the year. And then the Roswell incident. And so what happened in July of 1947 out in New Mexico near a U.S. Army Air Force base was a severe thunderstorm, and something landed on the farm of Matt Brazel. So what was it? Some people thought it was pieces or the remains of a flying saucer. Or was it just a weather balloon that got caught up in the thunderstorm? Well, the next day, the Roswell Herald got a statement from the Air Force Base. And they said, "We have a flying saucer," on July 8th. The next day, a general, higher-ranking officer issued another statement saying, no, it was a weather balloon. And the conspiracy started, right? At least that's what they have. But you know what? That really didn't take off for Roswell, New Mexico at that time. It really wasn't until the 1980s when a researcher named Stanton Friedman was trying to research more of this UFO stuff, and he came across the story of the Roswell incident and began researching for it, and he found all kinds of stuff from those old papers in the 40s in Roswell, New Mexico. And then by 1992, in Roswell, on Main Street, they opened up an International UFO Museum and Research Center. So if you want to do research on this, you can go there. They have a center waiting for you. And since the 1990s, we've had the Roswell UFO Festival. And really what happened, not immediately afterwards, in the 40s or 50s or 60s, but in the 1980s is when this took off. And I think the good people of Roswell figured out they've got a moneymaker on their hands. In fact, they've got annual festivals that bring in a lot of income to this little town. Well, 10 years later, there was another particular incident of note at Holman Air Force Base, also in New Mexico. And a lady who happened to be a nurse working at a nearby Indian reservation was driving home past the Air Force Base, and she saw something hovering and flying and moving and hovering over the edge of the Air Force Base. So she got out of her car, and with her 1950s technology, she didn't have an iPhone, kids, couldn't take a picture right away. She had to have a real camera. She took a picture, and this is it. This image has been around. Nobody to date has identified that white disk. 1957. Let's jump forward a little bit more. 1976. Some of you remember Jimmy Carter running for president. Yeah, there's a few of us who remember that. And during his campaign, somehow the question came up about UFOs. And Jimmy Carter, while he was still running for president, the first time, he said, well, yeah, it was the darndest thing I've ever seen. It was big, it changed colors, and it was about the size of the moon. We watched it for 10 minutes, but none of us could figure out what it was. One thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen an unidentified flying object in the sky because I've seen one. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information about this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and scientists. I am convinced UFOs exist because I have seen one. So that was Jimmy Carter, and he still got elected. Okay? 1976. So he became president, and nothing ever was released. And that just kind of added to the conspiracy story. Well, you know, Carter said he would release it. Then he got president. They showed him all the stuff and realized, oh no, yeah, you're right. We can't show this to the public. And that's the story just kept growing and growing from there. Popular mechanics tried to explain it, what he saw in those days. And they said, you know, like most UFO sightings, it's probably the planet Venus. In fact, a significant number of UFO sightings do turn out to be the planet Venus, the bright star rising in the morning, and it's also the evening star. It's one of the first stars we see late into the evening. So it's out there. People have seen it. The thing about the popular mechanics story, though, is just the size that Carter and his friends saw didn't match the planet Venus, much too big. Time of day and the movements, especially, don't match. So he saw something, and trying to explain it as planet Venus really didn't match up, even though a lot of people just said it's Venus, forget about it. So let me cover 4 things with you on this connection to evolution and secularism that's going on in our society, including the belief in alien life forms. A lot of people think, well, if life evolved on Earth and the universe is so big, then alien life must have formed somewhere else, just by chance. If it happened here, yeah, there's billions of galaxies out there, and each one has billions of stars. Some of them must have Earth-like planets. Somewhere there must be alien life, and we'll look at that. We're also going to look about, can other planets have the right conditions for life? Can life evolve by chance? Is that really even feasible? The other question we'll have to look at, okay, supposedly they did. They did pop into existence somewhere in the galaxies out there, or in our galaxy, and they could travel here. Even if it was in our own galaxy, that's a long way to go. That's a long, long time, not just to evolve a life form, but to create the civilization that could produce supposedly the technology that could get here and travel these distances. Is that feasible? And then UFO sightings, if they are real, if these are real aliens, then they must be real physical aliens piloting the craft, okay? Make sense? If life forms somewhere else and we're being visited by alien life forms, these are some details that have to be looked at. That they actually could have evolved, popped into existence on another planet. They have to travel vast distances, and these craft have to be piloted by real aliens. We're talking about physical aliens visiting us from other planets. Okay, if life evolved on Earth, could it happen here, elsewhere? NASA and many famous scientists believe this. And one of the things NASA has going today is actually an astrobiology department. They're looking for life elsewhere in the universe. If life popped into existence here, even if we're not sure how it could have happened, well, it must have happened elsewhere. And with the success of Apollo and the early space shuttles, you know, they needed something else to do. We're not going to go back to the moon, or found out there's not much there. We got enough moon rocks already. They've been studying those. So one of the things they are doing is looking at the search for life. How many of you heard of SETI? You know, the question, are we alone? Who knows what SETI stands for? Exactly, you've got it. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Somebody out there must be intelligent enough that they may not beam back videos of Gilligan Island and the captain and Ginger and everybody, but they must have something, and so we're listening. What are they listening for? Anything that would could be construed as an intelligent signal that is not random. Okay? And governments have spent billions of dollars on this, including a lot of your tax money. I don't think we're funding this right now, but private money still is going into this. And over the years, we've scanned 28 million radio frequencies per second for 40 years or more, and they're still doing it. We've never received one coded signal that has any pattern to it other than just plain random noise, right? They're looking for something that's not random. But wait a minute, they did have one in 1967. In 1967, radio astronomers picked up a signal that was not random. It went beep, 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 and continued like that. You know, I don't know if I got the frequency right, but it was a set frequency and it kept going. Obviously not random. So they called this signal, and the first name they gave it was LGM1. Does anybody know what LGM stands for?
Little green men.
Exactly, little green men. In those days, we thought aliens must be little green men, and so we get this coded signal, and they called it LGM1. Well, LGM1 turned out to actually be a pulsar. The more we got better signals, other scientists focused in on where that signal was coming from, and it turned out to be a pulsar, which is a rapidly rotating neutron star. And all that's going on is this neutron star is emitting pulsed radio waves, and they're not really pulsed, there's just one side of it that is very strong, where the waves create the motion pattern such that the radio waves are being transmitted out long distance in one direction on one side of the rotating star. And as it turns towards us, we hear the beep, and then it turns all the way around, and we hear the next beep, and it just keeps going. And obviously it wasn't very loud, but that's all it was. It's a pulsar. So, nope, that wasn't it. Still, no coded information. Now wait a minute, let's apply the logic of SETI to life on Earth. If you see a signal that contains information, even if it's just a little ... repeating signal, you know it's not random, it must be the sign of some type of intelligence, right? Do we have coded information on Earth that is not created by humans, but carries information? Think about it. It's DNA. It carries coded information, the blueprints to make you, you. And it's a very complex series of code, and it's becoming even more amazingly complex. So, do you think that the general scientists out there would say, well, we'll just apply the same logic as SETI, we find coded information, that means there must be intelligence. So as we look at DNA, oh, there must be an intelligent designer out there. Do you think they'll do that? Well, so far most of them have not, though there are some that are waking up to this. Coded information equals intelligence, that's all that is. And yet they won't apply the approach of SETI to what we have right here on Earth. Now the DNA helix discovery, the double helix, is over 50 years old now. Dr. Crick and Watson were the two who really identified it along with their team. Now Dr. Crick was an ardent atheist and he was very anti-Christian. But even then, in those days, of the early days of looking at DNA molecule and understanding what it was and that it was information, he realized, you know, this doesn't happen by chance. He realized there is a design conclusion. He applied the logic of the SETI people and said, yep, I've got coded information here, it's got an amazing structure. We don't understand the details of it yet, but even then he realized it could not have happened by mere chance. He called it a miracle. He called it a miracle. What else did he say? Well, he said it's very clear that evolution simply cannot happen no matter how long one is prepared to wait. Evolution is statistically impossible. Now, this is an atheist saying this about life on Earth, because even in those early days, he was figuring out how complex DNA is. But you know what his conclusion was? Panspermia. The aliens did it! Of course. I don't believe in God, even so this amazing molecule, this life on Earth, which is so complex and carries information, well, you know, it just must have come from somewhere else. So life on Earth began with microorganisms sent here from another planet by means of a long-range, maybe unmanned spacecraft. That's how that little blob, those first few cells, came to life in that primordial soup. Anything but admit that there might be a God. And of course, Carl Sagan was one of the experts that went along with this. Carl Sagan actually thought there might be 100,000 different alien civilizations out there. Of course, today he knows better. But this story continues. Life's housing may have come from space. You don't have to do much of a search and you'll find all kinds of articles about how life came from space. And they admit, as we know more and more of the very detailed and precise biochemistry needed to get all the right amino acids that are only left-handed, get them arranged for life to be. And could that happen by chance? Well, William Bonner, an organic chemist at Stanford, he said, well, terrestrial explanations are impotent and non-viable. In other words, no way can we explain the origin of life on Earth with any rationality to it. It's just not a viable story. Therefore, the aliens did it. But Sir Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist, he started looking as we understood how complex life is, and he started looking at how complex the living cell is, just a simple cell, and he started calculating the odds that all these amino acids and proteins could arrange themselves just by random chance. What are the odds that could really happen? He was a mathematician as well as an astronomer. He said, the likelihood of spontaneous formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number with 40,000 noughts after it. Enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. There was no primeval soup, neither on this planet nor any other, and if the beginnings of life were not random, they must therefore have been the product of purposeful intelligence. There is that SETI type of thinking again. Only he followed it to a logical conclusion. He started looking, and even before we know how complex life is today, he started realizing and calculating the chance of all this happening by itself on Earth, or any other planet, as he says, is 1 out of 10 to the 40,000th power. This is beyond impossible odds. This is ridiculous odds. This is nothing. Minuscule, zip chances that life could happen by itself. Only he wasn't able to, he was strong enough and obviously intuitive enough that he didn't push it out to space where the problem would still be there. And so Fred Hoyle actually became a deist. He said, guys, I can't do it anymore. I cannot be an atheist. The beginnings of life were not random. There must be a purposeful intelligence out there. So that's basically the intelligent design argument that says, yeah, God exists, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And the complexity of life shows it. And yet today, we still have planetary researchers who are sure life is out there. As I told you, Carl Sagan went to his grave believing in that. And there was an astronomer, one of the key people in the formation of SETI and their goal of looking for life out there. He came up, his name was Drake, and he came up with what's now called the Drake equation. He tried to take 7 key parameters, multiply them out to try to get an estimate of how many civilizations might be in our galaxy that evolved and that maybe someday we can communicate with. Send a few beep beeps back and forth during the commercials of Gilligan's Island. So here's the 7 parameters. You can look that up, the Drake equation. But the final result is supposed to be the number of civilizations. And what I want to do is look at a couple of these with you real quick. R is supposed to be the rate of star formation. Now, secular astronomers believe that there are star nurseries out there, that stars do form from swirling gases. And the first stars formed after the Big Bang of all these gases of hydrogen, and a little bit of helium and lithium, and they spin, and then finally gravity takes over and they condense, get tinier and tinier, and then poosh, a star is born. And I don't mean the Barbra Streisand movie. That's what they think. Now, if you look at the physics of that, could this happen? That stars just form from a cloud of gas? If we released a tank of gas, we brought in a tank of hydrogen, like kids use for blow up balloons, and released it, what would it do? Well, first of all, we wouldn't use hydrogen because that's too dangerous. They found that out with the Zeppelin, the Hindenburg. But let's just bring in helium, the next gas. So you bring in a tank of helium. Is the helium going to go into a corner of the room and then suddenly gravity takes over and it condenses into something and does something unique? What do gases want to do? And we have to force them into that canister, don't we? And then the old equation, PV equals nRT, really applies. It's a great law of gas, thermodynamics, and so on. Chemistry 101, heated gases want to expand. And in fact, you get them hot enough, they'll expand even more. See, with the whole idea of stellar evolution, the first parameter in the Drake equation is just not real. Gravities can't contract in a cloud somewhere in space where there's nothing to hold it together into a star. And I'm talking about the first one. One of their theories says, well, there were two stars that exploded and the nova put these pressure waves and pushed all the gas together. That's how it got close together and exploded into a star. So don't you see? But what do you need? You need two stars already there. Where'd they come from? See, contracting gases heat up, and the heated gases want to expand with a force 60 to 100 times stronger than gravity. You see, not only do atheists have no story for the first cell, living cell, the origin of life popping into existence, they don't have a good scientific story for the first star. If the Big Bang was true and all those gases went into space, they'd be expanding and expanding into space, but there's no reason for them to condense into the first star. And in fact, there are so many stars out there, and if the distances are correct and the time that it takes to get here is correct, then we should see ignition of stars in these nebulas happening all the time. Thousands a day. And we don't. Nobody has put a star being born on film. Not the stellar stars, just the movies. Charles Lauda and Frank Hsu, both astronomers, said this: despite numerous efforts, we have yet to directly observe the process of stellar formation. The origin of stars represents one of the fundamental, unsolved problems of contemporary astrophysics. And yet we've got science teachers out there telling them about the clouds of gas condensing into a star. It doesn't work with real science. And real science would certainly have been involved at the beginning or in the later stages of even Big Bang theory. You have to have that happening. And then there's the planet, Earth. Could there be other Earth-like planets? How many of you heard of the anthropic principle? That the parameters and the design criteria that are just right for life to even exist on Earth. So much so that an astronomer, Guillermo Gonzalez, wrote a book and a DVD, The Privileged Planet. And he talks about over 100 parameters have to be just right to sustain life on Earth. Not just the amount of gravity, but includes and how distance from the sun. Yet we're just in the right zone where water can stay in this narrow band between ice and gas or steam, and it's in that band. We have to be in this habitable band. We have to have a planet full of water and all the other ingredients to make life. Now, I have a whole talk on the origin of life, but let's just go to the conclusion. It really is impossible. Fred Hoyle realized it, and many other scientists since then. So if it's impossible for life to have started on Earth, why wouldn't we make the same conclusion about life, even no matter how Earth-like it was? If it's impossible on this planet, which has all those principles, then trying to push it off on another planet, and those aliens came here and dropped their waste products, and that was the formation of the first cell, that is also going to be a ridiculous story, not scientific. And some secular scientists agree. Paul Davies, who is a cosmologist at Arizona State University, and I think he is an atheist, I know he believes in evolution, he released a book called The Eerie Silence. He's saying, we've been looking a long time, and the odds of life, you put that all together, he doesn't believe that there are aliens out there. He's one of the few secular scientists, unlike Sagan and Hawking and some others who are still alive. But Davies admits, he said, yeah, we are just the lucky ones. All those parameters happened, and somehow life formed here. We don't have a clue. But when you look really at it, and you look at the odds, including the ones and the odds of a sun forming and how many planets could have formed life, you put some of these numbers into the Drake equation itself, and you end up with a big fat zero. That's the fraction of alien life forms. Physical aliens evolving in space. There's just no chance. And the more we are learning about microbiology and biochemistry and astronomy, as we look at these supposed planets that might be Earth-like, the exoplanets they call them, every one of them gets disqualified. Big gas planets, or they're too close to their sun, no chance of any kind of life forming. Okay, so I think that's a big fat zero. And God doesn't say anything about creating life anywhere else but here. His focus is here. We can get into the theology and more science, but let's go on to point 3. Even if aliens did pop into existence somewhere else, think about the vast distances they would have to travel to get here. I mean, Alpha Centauri, it would still take a generation or more to get here. Well, you know, maybe they have technology. But even if you could go faster than the speed of light or approach the speed of light, space is full of dust and particles. And if it could go fast enough for a spacecraft could go fast enough for interstellar travel, hitting any particle would be like several tons of TNT going off in the spaceship. It would be amazing amount of energy because of the kinetic force involved there, even if it's a tiny particle. At light speed, one particle getting through would destroy the spaceship. And the energy requirements are unfathomable. Unfathomable. To propel a 1-pound ball up to anything close to light speed would require the energy of 20 hydrogen bombs just to get going. That's a lot of energy that has to be contained and controlled. But then you need the same amount of energy to slow it down. Otherwise, you just keep going. And if you entered our solar system and you hit a planet, bam, that would be a little bit of a disaster too. Even if you managed to avoid hitting all that dust in space. See, the technology you need would defy everything we know about physics in several fronts. Isaac Asimov, one of the authors, he was also an atheist, so he wrote some interesting books. But anyway, one of the things he said about interstellar travel, even though he wrote about it in what's called science fiction, he said the energy requirements for interstellar travel are so great, it's inconceivable to me that any creatures piloting their ships across the vast depths of space would do so only in order to play games with us for a period of decades and pop in and out. If they wanted to make contact, they would make contact. And if not, they would save their energy and go elsewhere. So you could say, but give me warp factor 9. And Scotty would say, but Captain, the engines can't take it. It's just not possible. It's fun to have the science fiction. You can make stuff up. Yeah, that's Scotty. You know, it is science fiction to travel at multiple warp speeds. Einstein said you cannot travel faster than light speed. You would need infinite mass and energy. That's a big obstacle. So when we make up things like warp speed and shields to protect us into space and wormholes, invented ideas, hey, it's fun for a movie, but it's not real. I like this stuff, but I'm an engineer. And I want things to work according to the laws of physics, right? And even if you had advanced technology, you know, our iPhones and the different pads we use and these computers, you know, those are amazing things compared to just 50 years ago. But they still follow the laws of physics. There are laws of physics that have to be made. We just discover new ways to apply them, but we can't break them. We can't break those laws. Well, the final point I was going to make is UFO sightings must be real aliens visiting in real spaceship, okay? Can the spaceships get here? Probably not. Could they have evolved? Most unlikely. But let's say they did visit us. So here's a picture of the famous Roswell alien body, and they did an autopsy on that alien body. Flying saucer crash, alien bodies were taken from the wreckage and hidden in Area 51. How many of you heard of Area 51, right? Everybody's heard about that. It was an Independence Day, and half of the science fiction movies out there that involve aliens all talk about Area 51. Well, Area 51 and this story of about an alien body was debunked actually within a matter of days. But it took on a life of its own. Somebody made a movie of the alien autopsy without the actual facts. There was a guy named Jesse Marcel who had a history of fraud, and he made this movie, the Alien Autopsy movie. It was portrayed as real, had very powerful images, and he even submitted some of his film, Kodak film, when they made this movie in the 1940s, of a secret camera doing the autopsy. And it's on the internet. You can probably still find it. I don't know. But you know what? The film that they submitted to Kodak to prove it was real, it was, you know, it did come from the 1940s. It wasn't anything modern or new. They only gave Kodak the header in part of the film. So Kodak said, yep, it's our film, circa 1940s technology and chemistry, but the piece of film had nothing to do with the alien autopsy. It was just a little piece of the header of the film, but nothing about the autopsy itself. Actually, it actually has been shown to lie. As I mentioned, one of the actors came forward and debunked it himself. It's been called one of the biggest hoaxes ever. In fact, they made the movie for money. You see something interesting? Yeah. And as I mentioned, Jesse Marcel was known for fraud. He even faked his own military history. He was what's called now an honor thief. Well, Project Mogul was a major project of the Air Force in the 1940s. Now, in the 1940s, did we have satellites spying on Russia and other countries to see what they were up to? 1947 is just a few years after World War II, right? We were the only ones who had the bomb. And we were wondering if the Russians were working on it, because they stole some German scientists too. And it was a secret project since we didn't have satellites to look down and look at some of these Russian bases and installations. They came up with an idea that we could take a cluster of weather balloons and balsa wood and put in some cameras that we could kind of put some type of technology at that time that would be kick in at certain altitudes, just take film, and hopefully the weather, if we released it in the right place, would push these weather balloons high over Russia, and a few of them might go over the right installations, and then a few of those we might recover somewhere else in the Arctic or the Baltic Sea, or who knows. That was the idea. I mean, we had no other way of looking down on them. Well, we had no satellites. We tried this. It was an Air Force experiment. And in the thunderstorm, that's what came down. The Air Force could not admit this at the time. And what confused a few people, maybe even some of the Air Force personnel who picked up the wreckage from the farm, found silver foil covering the box, and actually there was some tape across it. It had alien symbols on it. It was some ancient alien hieroglyphics like you might see on the alien shows on the History Channel, as if it's real history. But it was actually something by the 3M company, a Scotch tape that had a toy company or some other toy company, and they were making this tape for fun for kids. And somebody at the Air Force decided to use it to tape up their little box. So the Roswell incident really was dismissed early with plausible stories, what's going on at the Air Force and stuff like that. However, Roswell is still in our culture as an important place for alien stuff. However, there is stuff out there. There is stuff out there. We have got pictures, sometimes videos. We've got these airline pilots. And, 90% of these sightings do turn out to be something. They do turn out to be weather balloons. They do turn out to be satellites, planet Venus, or something else. Or even just plain old airplane lights. Maybe a small airplane that nobody is expecting to see. But then there's the other 10%. And of that remainder, a third of those are the planet Venus. So if you do your math, that leaves 7% with no viable explanation. Let's call it 5 to 7% with no viable explanation. People do see these lights, just like the airline pilots end of last year. But these things do crazy things. They defy physics. They do U-turns at impossible speeds. These lights go zing, 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 up, and then they're gone. They turn quickly, and they move through our atmosphere without making a sound. Are they defying the laws of physical physics? First, the inertia and all the problems of being able to do that within Earth's gravity are pretty impossible. You can make up alien technology as an excuse, but you still got to follow the laws of physics. And even if you could go that fast in our atmosphere, you would make a disturbance and noise like no other. And we don't see it, we don't hear it. Occasionally they show up on a radar screen and then they're gone. But what would make them go? What are they? What is this 7%? Well, a lot of people who have seen these and can confirm it over and over again what they saw, it's interesting that they did this when they were non-Christians. And those that became Christians never saw anything like that again. Interesting clue, right? We got kids in the room, but some of these alien abductions include unspeakable things being done to the bodies of the abductees. And research has shown them to be under some type of hypnotic state. They never leave Earth and go up to a spaceship. They're here, but they're in a hypnotic state, but they're aware of what's going on, and they try to resist it, and it's like their body's frozen, they can't move. You ever had a dream like that, where you want to run, and you can't move? This is similar. Now there's some research out there that puts more of this, and I'll get into that, on the spiritual connection. Research has shown that people who are not affiliated with any church, but who claim they are religious, have some type of spiritual connection, are particularly susceptible to the possible existence of extraterrestrials. For them, ufology is a substitute religion. That's not me talking, but that's a ufologist being quoted in a German news magazine. And I'm sure you can find them here as well. How many of you heard of the movies The Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Well, back in those days, Dr. Jacques Vallée was a very well-known and respected ufologist. He had been studying this whole topic for a long time. And he was actually one of the experts, the consultants for Spielberg when he made the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he wrote this. Ooh, there they are. That what takes place through close encounters with UFOs is control of human beliefs, control of the relationship between our consciousness and physical reality, that this control has been enforced throughout history, and that it is of secondary importance that it should now assume the form of sightings of space visitors. So in his research, what he is saying, not me, he is saying that as we interview people who've been abducted and they describe this state, it's very similar to a hypnotic state, and it's very similar to other accounts in previous centuries. It's nothing new in terms of the hypnotic state, the feeling of being trapped and being experimented on or checked out in various ways. Here's another secular researcher, John Keel. How many of you have seen the movies Men in Black? Again, fun science fiction movie, but that's all it is, remember? Well, in 1967, it was John Keel who popularized the term Men in Black. He came up with that. He also was a writer for the Monkees. Yeah, no, we're the Monkees. He was a Hollywood guy, and he really did some also more research into this alien stuff, and he really believed that, you know, we are being visited by UFOs. There are aliens. They're extraterrestrial. He believed that, and so as he got into the data and talked to more and more people, he abandoned that idea. And his third book, UFOs, Operation Trojan Horse, published in 1970, he said about these ghosts and demons, he called them ultra-terrestrials. He said that these UFO occupants he believed to be non-human entities, non-physical entities, capable of taking whatever form they want. Interesting. So here's some conclusions under its remaining 7% that cannot be explained. Keel went on to say this: the devil and his dominions can, according to the literature, manifest themselves in almost any form and can physically imitate anything, from angels to horrifying monsters with glowing eyes. Strange objects and entities can materialize and dematerialize in the stories that are recorded, just as UFOs and their splendid occupants appear and disappear, walk through walls, and do supernatural feats. The manifestations and occurrences described in this imposing literature are similar. Now he's going back to hundreds of years of literature about these things. He said, today, these old stories, if not entirely identical to the UFO phenomenon, are close to the phenomenon. Got myself lost. If not entirely identical to the UFO phenomenon itself. Victims of demonomania or possession suffered the same medical and emotional symptoms as the UFO contactees. In other words, they're not blaming it on humans, but they know something else is going on in the spiritual world, and they feel the same, have the same symptoms. Keel continues, the UFO manifestations seem to be, by and large, merely minor variations of the old demonological phenomenon. In other words, he's going back and saying, you know what, we've seen these things before in our literature. If you know anything about Grimm's fairy tales, when they're not cleaned up by Disney, they are very dark. Very dark, magical, negative spirits in there. So the old phenomenon, in the, let's say, the Middle Ages, 500 years ago or so, these demons appeared as fairies, goblins, and trolls because that's what the culture expected to see. If you believe in goblins and you're afraid of them in the forest, and you see something and you get visited by something like that, you see what you expect to see, a goblin, and the demons know that. So he's saying today's aliens, no matter how we look at them as little green men, or the common version today, if you know, is called the Greys. That's the figure on the right. You know, the long, slender body with the big bug eyes, but they're all very shades of gray. He's saying that's just demons forming and looking like what we expect them to see today compared to 400, 500 or more years ago. Joe Jordan, on the left there with Gary Bates at Roswell, He is a director of research for MUFON. MUFON is a real organization. You can go to their website. They do catalog UFO sightings around the world. It was pretty amazing when I checked it out. It stands for the Mutual UFO Network, the world's largest clearinghouse for UFO investigations and reports. And he started looking into this. He was, their researcher. He's just doing basic research. And these people who claim to be abducted by aliens, he discovered that these abductions were being halted by people who called out in the name of Christ. Wow. And people who profess to be practicing born-again Christians seem to be generally immune from such experiences. Their buddy next door had these experiences, but they weren't a Christian. The Christians never saw it. People who knew enough to call out the name of Christ, it stopped, and they got out of that hypnotic state. This is a secular researcher saying it. It's not me. So, as he noticed this, he asked his MUFON buddies, and they were aware of it, and they said, well, yeah, it's just a coincidence. We're not interested. We're not interested in those kind of things. Believe. But, being a good researcher, he decided to see, well, what is it about these Christians that aliens don't like? So he went to a Bible study. He said, okay, Christians, I'm going to watch you. What's different about you? And he realized that he was dealing with a spiritual phenomenon and not an extraterrestrial one. And you know what? You're exposed to the Word of God long enough and you have an open heart and you realize what's going on. Joe became a Christian. He invited Christ into his heart. And so he's got quite a story there. Let's see. I don't think I have time for my story, but maybe after the Q&A. So my final conclusions is this. 93% of all these sightings and abductions can be explained by natural means. There's something easily explained about it, natural events. But that leaves roughly the 5 to 7%. What are they? Well, what I've tried to show you is that evolution of life elsewhere in the universe is not possible. There are no physical aliens out there watching those old episodes of I Love Lucy and wondering how they can come here. And if they wanted to, it's not plausible. It's just not physical plausible to have spacecraft with that kind of energy and requirements to come here and then just play games with us. So the question then is, what are they? Well, I've already showed you the big hints there, what others have concluded, and it's not me, including secular experts have said we are dealing with interdimensional or spiritual beings, most likely fallen angels that appear as the culture expects. You expect to see goblins and trolls under your bridges in the forest? That's what some of them saw. You expect to see aliens coming to help us? Might be what you see. My advice is be careful what you play with. Be careful what you play with. My wife tells a story when she was in high school, they had a slumber party. She's back there. Hi, Thea. And they were doing one of these chants in a mirror. You're at a slumber party and the girls are all giggling and you want to do something a little edgy. And so they did these chants in a mirror. And then one night at one party, they saw something. And it scared the bejeebies out of them and they never did it again. Right, Thea? That's true. Be careful what you play with. There is a spiritual world out there. There is sin and evil out there. There are demons out there. We don't like to say that in our modern technological world, but then you try to explain these lights that appear and disappear and go at high speed, make right angle turns, and then what's happening to these people, and the people who call upon the name of Jesus Christ are immune. Isn't that something? But as I look around at the movies and everything and our culture and what some of these scientists are saying, I think we're being set up for an arrival, maybe, of fallen angels appearing as aliens. Oh yeah, we've been expecting you. Maybe you're going to help us achieve world peace and give us a one-world government. We have a culture that's waiting for that. Be careful what you play with. Be careful. And I think in our culture we do have a greater awareness of demonic influences. How many of you know that the Catholic Church does exorcisms till today? Something like, 20 years ago or less, 15 years ago, they would only get a call to do an exorcism. Like in 2011, they had fewer than 15 Catholic exorcists, and they weren't very busy. You know, there wasn't people calling up on the phone, "Can you come do an exorcism on my daughter?" Today, they get over 100 calls. This was just in a issue of the Atlantic Journal, The Atlantic. American exorcisms are increasing. People are sensing something is going wrong here spiritually, and they're looking for help. Witchcraft is thriving in the U.S. There's an estimated 1.5 million Americans now calling themselves witches, more than the total number of Presbyterians, an old line church. As Christianity declines across the country, paganism has swung to be the mainstream. And they're playing with things they don't understand. They're playing with spiritual fire, and it will not turn out good. So what's a thinking Christian to do? What about those of us who call upon the name of Jesus? And we know these things are happening in our culture. What do we tell our kids and our grandkids? Well, let me go first to a little old movie. How many of you saw Star Wars? In the second Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is getting trained as a Jedi Knight to fight the evil Sith. And he's getting trained by Yoda. And at one point, when he's tired and resting, he turns to Yoda and says, "Is the dark side stronger?" You know, he's starting to feel fearful. Are those demons stronger? And Yoda's answer is, no, quicker, more seductive, but not stronger. Not stronger. So let's turn to the Bible. 2 Corinthians, it says, "No wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Therefore it's not surprising if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness, but whose end will be according to their deeds." There is a demonic world. If God exists and we live in a fallen world, there is a dark side. There is good and evil. And there are fallen angels or demons. So what do we tell our kids? First, remind them who is stronger. "I am convinced," Paul says in Romans 8, "that neither death nor life nor angels nor demons will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." Call upon the name of Jesus and you will be saved, and the demons will run. And for those of you, I don't know everybody here obviously, so for those of you that are born again, who are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, you have these promises. In 1 John 4, "You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than he that is in the world." Teach your kids that verse. Get them to memorize it, your grandkids. Greater is he that is in you than he that's in the world. So no matter what happens to you in life, hopefully none of this stuff happens, or you just come across, obstacles in life. Greater is he that is in you than he is in the world. And put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Ephesians 6:11. And finally, Jesus says in John 8, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in the darkness, but will have the light of life." Isn't that a great promise? Maybe you already thought that these UFO things and alien abductions had something to do with the spiritual world. But it's not going to happen to you when you call upon the name of Jesus, because he who is in you is greater than in the world, and you don't have to walk in the darkness. So my question for you, is the light of life in you? Is the light of life in you? Are you sure? Have you invited Jesus Christ into your heart? You all know John 3:16. Right? "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And you will have the light. Isn't that great news? So no matter what happens with these demons or something else is going on, Jesus is our only hope, and he is the light of life, and he comes to anybody who would just freely invite him, to admit sin and invite him in. So as you look at the stars, remember, you're that little tiny dot, but God loves you, you personally. We're going to have questions a little later. You're going to come up and do a little announcement, but I want to do a commercial if I may. The Alien Intrusion is almost 2 hours long. It's a good documentary. It was in theaters. It's with Gary Bates, and you actually have interviews with people who were abducted in the movie, and a little more material that I can give you tonight. So take a look at that, some of the other material out there. This is a brand new DVD. I have a dozen copies, I think. How many of you seen Christianity Today, where they talk about, well, Adam and Eve literally didn't exist, that we did come from monkeys 200,000 years ago? Well, this is the answer. This is the antidote to that issue. DNA battles. It includes interviews with Jeff Hawkins, Robert Carter, and Nathaniel Jeanson, which I have his other book out there. But Jeanson is a biochemist or a geneticist from Harvard University. He's a young guy, and he just goes through the science. It's just awesome stuff. And then finally, how many of you been to the Grand Canyon? How many of you heard him tell you about millions and billions of years? How would you like to go to the Grand Canyon and have a Christian tour? The biblical explanation of those rock layers and how that is best explained by the flood of Noah. That's what we're offering, June 6th to 9th. Pick up a flyer. We've got them back there. Basically, you could fly, if you want to do it quick, 4-day weekend, fly from Minneapolis to Phoenix, and then we take over. You have a free shuttle to the hotel, and then we have welcome program. You go to the canyon, you get lectures at many locations. We'll stay up in Page, and the next morning we'll actually raft on the Colorado River. No whitewater, so anybody can go 4 years up and over. But you experience towering cliffs on both sides of you as you raft through this 2 to 3 hour trip. And then we get back on the bus, go back to Arizona, do another program, have a Sunday morning worship, and then you can either fly back to Minneapolis, or maybe you've made it part of a longer vacation and you go continue to see other exciting stuff out there. Sorry, had to do my commercial. Thank you.